Did you just write a first draft of your college admissions essay, and does it totally suck? If so, in this video, I'm going to tell you how to take a crap-tastic first draft of a personal statement or college admissions essay and turn it into something much better. My name's Brooke. I've been coaching students through the college admission essay writing process for over a decade and a half. You can find out more about me at SupertutorTV.com/essay, where we have information both about our 4-week writing the college essay class, as well as our private coaching options. I also have a couple of courses for the SAT and the ACT that are available at SupertutorTV.com. You can follow us here on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We have a new Facebook group, so if you want to ask free questions in the college admissions process, that's the best way to get me on the line totally for free. It's called Competitive College Admissions, so you can join that on Facebook. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how to stand out, how to make your crap-tastic essay draft into something better. And the first thing that I'm going to say is do not freak out. A lot of people write crappy essays the first time around. It's totally normal. You should see how abominable some of the first drafts of some of my best students who have written the best essays I've ever seen in my life looked. They were terrible. So rest assured you are not alone. I'm going to read for you guys a fake mock draft of an essay I wrote pretending to be a 17-year-old writing my college essay that is absolutely abominable, like a snowman. And then I'm going to talk about how I can improve it. And hopefully in that give you 3 tips for how to improve your embarrassingly atrocious first draft of your essay. Okay. My palms are sweating and I'm nervous. I stand in the wings of the stage as the orchestra starts its playing. The music echoes through backstage as I stand hushed and nervous. My clothes are not pretty and I'm dressed in brown and I'm the second woman and I wish I were someone else. Soon I'll sing my one line and then assume my position in the mass of the chorus, pouring the part of me that is unhappy to be here into the unhappiness of my character. At least I'm in character. My first year in theater wasn't that fun. My first year at a new school wasn't that fun. Starting over wasn't much fun in general. In high school, I moved to a new high school in a different state. I was fine about moving and imagined it was going to be a great way to have a fresh start. But when I arrived, it wasn't as great as I had hoped. I had trouble making friends at first, and the people I hung out with felt like they were pretty superficial with me a lot of the time. My classes were fine. Some were weirdly hard and not in a way that I thought I was learning more, but more in that way that like tests are hard, but nobody is teaching me. Anyhow, it took me a year or two, but eventually I started to find my place for myself at my new school. Theater was one way I did that. When I moved, everybody said theater was awesome at my new school, and I came from a school with a good band and was a pretty good musician, so I shifted my interests. But I hated the first show I did. Luckily, I started to make friends in theater and then started to like it more and took more classes. And then I had a lot of personal breakthroughs. I learned so much about myself from theater and acting, and I'm really thankful for that opportunity. Overall, the move wasn't so bad. I'm grateful I got to learn and grow by moving. By the end, I was having fun on stage and found a new role for myself. So I got to pun it at the end, right? But this essay, 1, it's way too short. 2, I got really specific at the beginning, but it's cliche in so many ways, right? And then above all, it suffers from an issue that so many of your essays suffer from, which is that it's super vague. So we're going to get through some of the issues with this essay. And the first thing that I'm going to say is if you have a terrible essay, the first thing you want to do is get rid of how vague it is. Specifics are gold when you're writing your essays, and this is a principle that I've talked to you guys about before. Now, obviously, there's some other principles as well at work and at stake, but this is one thing that I'm going to say is to be interesting, to be different, to be more readable and exciting. One thing you want to do is you always want to be more specific. And the more specific you are, then it's going to be easier also to do some of the following steps that I have after this particular step. So first of all, I'm going to look here in my second paragraph, and you can say, in high school, I moved to a new high school in a different state. This is pretty dull because I don't even know where I moved from or to. I have no idea about the context of the kind of person that I am, okay? So I'm gonna replace that with something else. I'm gonna say something more on the lines of, after having moved to Overland Park, Kansas, I initially imagined an Oz-worthy path whereby I could reinvent myself, but the reality was far more sidelining at first. So you can see here, I know where the heck I'm going, and I imagined it as sort of like Oz, which is actually true. I was like obsessed with the idea that like it was yellow brick roads and happy-go-lucky Americana, right? I was moving to the center of America. It was this dreamscape, wonderful place where I could become a new and lovely person. That would be wonderful. But getting there, it wasn't that great, okay? But I don't explain that at all, and I'm super vague, and I just kind of say, It was hard, and it was hard to make friends at first. It's so boring, right? I need to get into more detail. And this is just one line that I'm making more specific, but I could do this all over this essay, like crazy. It is vague like crazy. I need to be specific like crazy, right? When I say I had trouble making friends at first and the people I hung out with felt pretty superficial, that's super vague. I need to tell the specific story of I remember sitting at the lunch table, and dipping my carrots in ranch dip on my little circular plate of vegetables that I would get to accompany my sandwich, and thinking how dull and boring the conversations were because everybody was just talking about like, oh, how was the history test? Oh my gosh, it was so hard. And like everything seemed just so superficial to me. But I could recount an exact moment, an exact something, and that would make this better, right? So that's my first tip, is turn your vague things into more specific actual things that happen to you. Tell little stories and get specific. Okay, so that's tip number one. Number two, my second point is you want to try to find a theme of some sort. And the theme is the thing that makes your story deeper. It's the thing that what it's actually about, right? Like obviously this is about me moving and being in theater, but what it's actually about is this tension, right, between me being the second woman. If I pick the most interesting specific that was in my first draft, which I think is saying that I played the second woman, that's kind of like random funky little detail, right? If I were writing an essay about being on stage, you'd probably expect me to be like, oh, I was so nervous in the wings, and then I overcame my nerves, and I was bold, and I overcame my stage fright, and I played the lead role, or I played a good role. What I don't expect is somebody who's used to playing lead roles making an entire essay about the crappiest role that they ever embodied, and how actually, despite the fact that the role wasn't that big, it started me on a path that became really growth-oriented, and eventually I learned that what value theater brought to my life wasn't about being the star or being in front of everybody or being shiny and performing and having a good voice or whatever it is. It was actually about the meaning that theater brought to my life, and this idea that it helped me understand how to control my emotions. It helped me understand the mechanism whereby we as human beings respond and react. It gave me a method through method acting for doing that. So it opened up this whole world for me, right? And that's actually the theme that I want to talk about, that I was lost. I felt like the second woman in my real life. I felt like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how I fit in. I felt nameless and forgettable, right, when I moved, just like this character in the play did, or in the play was, right? So there's this parallelism that I find, and that becomes my theme, that I felt forgettable. I felt like I didn't know who I was. But actually, in time, I found through theater something much deeper, and learned to figure out who I am, and had a better sense of self, and learned to control my emotions, and learned so much about who I am. And it sparked this period of growth for me. And that's what I want to talk about, and that's my theme. And part of my theme is this tension between reality and fiction, and part of it is this tension between being a nobody and being a somebody, and figuring out who I am and figuring out my identity. But when you have that theme, then you can start to dig into that ideologically, and then you ask yourself, does every line align with a theme? And if it doesn't, it needs to go. The first line doesn't align with my theme. My palms are sweating and I'm nervous. No, having sweaty palms and being nervous isn't my theme. That needs to go. Not only is it stupid and cliche, but it absolutely needs to go because it has nothing to do with my theme. I stand at the wings of the stage as the orchestra starts playing. Does that have to do with my theme? Not really. The music echoes as I stand hushed and nervous. Being nervous is not my theme. My theme is I don't know how I fit in, right? My theme is I played the second woman and nobody's ever heard of her, and I'm forgettable, and I'm this hunched over 60-year-old woman, which might not seem at all like me, but I found me in her, right? And you can see I'm starting to build out a much more interesting story because I've got a theme, I'm dealing with this tension, I'm digging into what I would call irony or surprise, contrast, the unexpected, right? And I'm always looking for some kind of contrast, irony, surprise, the unexpected, whatever it is. And I'm trying to build that out in some kind of theme and trying to build out some kind of tension. My third tip is to layer multiple stories. So as you can see my story starting to build out, which I've read to you guys, you can see a third kind of principle at work, and that's the idea of layering stories. A lot of times your initial essay sucks because it's just too boring and there's not enough going on. It doesn't mean that there's nothing in that essay that's interesting about you. It just means that like when you've only written this much about you, even if it's 650 words and you filled the whole space, a lot of times you're not saying enough about you. And the one story you've told isn't deep enough and delicious enough to really share who you are with us. And so if you can create a more complex picture, if you can layer stories on top of each other, and if you can find the metaphor or find the resonance between different stories, sometimes that helps you build a more interesting portrait. So you can see how I can go back and forth, and I'm going to go down to my second draft here. I played the second woman in Fiddler on the Roof. You've probably never heard of her, but when I was 15 years old, clearly not a hunched over 60-year-old like my character was, I portrayed her and perhaps my own circumstances echoed her plight. Nearly nameless, a member of the chorus in brown garb, drab and unbecoming, only one cluster of lines replaceable, forgettable. After having moved to Overland Park, Kansas, I initially imagined an Oz-worthy path whereby I could reinvent myself, but the reality was far more sidelining at first. So you see how I'm building out this parallelism between I'm like the 60-year-old woman, second woman on stage, but I also felt this loss of tradition in the face of change. Though I admit that dancing at a wedding wouldn't get me arrested, I too faced my own transition, my own coming to terms with finding my voice, a sense of balance, like a fiddler precariously performing on the roof. And I'm stealing the theme of Fiddler on the Roof, which is that there's a fiddler on the roof because he's like all of, it's like change. Without our traditions, we'd be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof, right? He could fall off the roof. This is very dangerous. But you get what I'm saying. I take the story of the play that I'm performing, I take the story of me performing in a play, and then I take the story of me moving. I have 3 stories layered right now. Isn't that cool? And then I can go super meta on myself, because I can look at themes that resonate in all 3 stories. When you layer things, you can create interesting connections between stories and then create depth. And that becomes a more interesting story than just one plain simple story. And that's a final way that you can turn your not so amazing essay into something more amazing, is use it as a base of your layer cake and give me 7 more rainbow layers to your unicorn surprise cake. All right? Fabulous. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and know if you need more resources with writing your essays. We have lots more videos right here, as well as resources at SupertutorTV.com/essays, so be sure to check those out. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time on SuperTutorTV.